Consider me officially annoyed because I've got some great viewers, intelligent 49ers fans, and you are all subject right now to the same garbage that I have to consume on my timeline. All these fake trade rumors, all these fake Brandon Ayuk reports, repurposed by aggregators into even worse headlines, and basically nobody cares what's true anymore as long as they get some clicks. So let us set the record straight. Nobody is denying that the 49ers are interested in Maxx Crosby. However, we have known that for months. They're interested in all these great players, and some of them, yes, they will trade for them. See Christian McCaffrey back in 2022. There are plenty of different examples. But for outlets to act like something is imminent just because they aren't getting enough clicks because it is June 17th is absolutely exhausting. And, I see different rationalizations that just make absolutely no sense. The first myth here is that the 49ers feel some kind of need to react to the Rams trading for Myles Garrett. I'm sorry, that is not how the NFL works, nor should it be how the 49ers think. First off, if you're reacting to the Myles Garrett trade, getting a defensive end is not going to help you combat Myles Garrett. You're going to have to get an offensive tackle for that to happen. And the 49ers already have one of the stronger offensive tackle pairings in the league. They've got Trent Williams on one side. They've got Colton McKivitz blossoming into his best self on the right side. Obviously, they're going to have George Kittle back at some point this season to help the offensive tackles. The 49ers are going to give it their best against Myles Garrett with what they have on the offensive line, not on the defensive line. If you start getting into rash arms races with other teams in the league, especially with the salary cap existing, you will quickly find yourself spiraling into long-term mediocrity. That is how people play football on video games, on Madden. That is not how people play in the NFL. That is not how good organizations operate. You continue with your own plan, and the 49ers have executed what looks to be a good one. They have completely rehashed their defensive line over the course of the past 2 years in a sustainable way. You continue with that moving forward. And does that include adding somebody like Maxx Crosby at some point? Maybe it does. But it's not a knee-jerk thing in response to the Myles Garrett trade. We know that the 49ers were interested in Crosby earlier this offseason. We also know that they were not able to match the price that the Baltimore Ravens ultimately committed to him, a price of 2 first-round picks, one in 2026, one in 2027. Of course, Baltimore nixed that trade by saying that the physical wasn't good for Maxx Crosby. So that's a whole other wrench in this whole thing. So he went back to the Raiders. The initial price, though, was way too high for the 49ers to match because the Ravens had more valuable draft picks than San Francisco, and they're willing to offer 2 first-round picks. Now that Crosby is back on the Raiders, is a trade theoretically possible at a lower price point that the 49ers can potentially get involved in? Of course it is. But you also have to use logic. And, here's another myth, and let me apply the logical test to this. The second myth is that the 49ers have opened so much cap space. They got $71 million right now of 2026 room to trade right now. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The only people that will say this are people that don't understand the salary cap, or people that just want to create headlines so that people click on their stuff, or both. Sometimes the people that create headlines so that people click on their stuff don't understand the salary cap. But the 49ers didn't open up space now in order to trade right now. In fact, they'd be able to absorb Maxx Crosby's contract before any of the restructure work that they did. I think the guy's owed about $30 million this year, and I think that the Raiders structured it so that you'd have to absorb almost all of the cap hit now because it divvied up in base salary. Of course, you could restructure Maxx Crosby's contract to push stuff further down the line, but that's neither here nor there. The point is that the 49ers created all of this 2026 space because that's the way that they operate under the salary cap. They love to create as much room now so they can carry it over. Unused cap space moves over from season to season into the future. So they want to move that over, the vast majority of it, from 2026 to 2027. 2027. It's their preferred way of operating under the salary cap. We've seen a lot of garbage Brandon Ayuk reporting and headlines that also does not understand how the 49ers work under the salary cap. They would rather, if they could find any way to do it, Ayuk can maybe force their hand in the opposite direction. I've talked about that a lot. But as it stands right now, the 49ers are able to push over $21 million of dead Brandon Ayuk money that's already been paid out to him, but is right now prorated into the future against the salary cap. They enjoy having that pushed out into the future because their cap management strategy, more aggressive than any other teams in this regard, is to push that money into the future, which is exactly why they have the most cap space in the league right now. There's so many bills coming due for the 49ers in 2027 and 2028 when these cap numbers escalate. So no, they don't have a ton of room right now just so they can go trade for Maxx Crosby right now. That is a logical fallacy that just is not rooted in understanding of the cap. In fact, a lot of people are saying there's a lot of urgency because of this cap room. I would say the opposite. It is more likely that the 49ers go out and sign somebody like a Joey Bosa, if he even wants to sign, or a Jadeveon Clowney, a veteran who's still there to fill that second veteran edge rusher need, the edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa. It is more likely they go to the free agent market first, and then the trade market becomes something that's a whole lot more appealing as the deadline nears over the course of the regular season. There is logical timing to all of this. And you got to think, well, the 49ers, they built themselves a veteran team right now. They're a rising defense built on younger players surrounding Nick Bosa on that defensive line. You've taken some veteran rolls of the dice. You're obviously invested a lot still in somebody like Nick Bosa, who's going to be returning from injury this offseason. You're probably going to want a look to see how this current group is performing before you invest a massive amount in an outsider to come in, before you I wouldn't say completely, but before you largely derail your plan of draft investment to make this defensive line younger. So you start the regular season, you might be 3-1, you might be 4-1, you might be 5-1, maybe you're 6-1 if things are going well for the 49ers. That is where you start to think about, where can this team be most potentially reinforced by a veteran? That's why you see a lot of trades start to happen before the trade deadline. You don't see them typically happen on June 17th or around this time of the year. That's one reason, the 49ers side. The other side is the Raiders side. And look, I got both jerseys in there today because I figured we're talking 49ers Raiders, we're talking Maxx Crosby, we're talking how annoyed I am with some of this stuff. Well, that's the Shane Leckler jersey. That's the Frank Gore jersey. That, of course, you might recognize him. Let me point at him right there. That's Joe Montana. It's halftime, by the way, of England-Croatia. Not like I'm watching all too closely, but it seemed like a fairly entertaining game over at Jerry World in Dallas. But the Raiders side of the story is, well, they actually have this renewed sense of optimism surrounding Maxx Crosby. Yeah, they tried to trade him. They thought they had him traded. They thought they had those 2 first-round picks back. I think that's the price that the Raiders were going to require. I don't know if they're going to get 2 first-round picks at this point anymore. And if the cost of dealing Maxx Crosby was that, if they determined that was what would make it worth it for them, and they're not going to get that anymore following the failed physical over in Baltimore, well, they've now completed a big free agency haul. They got themselves the draft class that they like. They've got a new head coach. They might want to try to run with Maxx Crosby. Like, I wouldn't not believe the Raiders when they say that they want to enter this season with Maxx Crosby. They want to see what they can do under Kubiak with the dual quarterback setup of Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza with all these new players. Maxx Crosby's a good football player. We know that. They probably want to give it a shot with number 98. Now, again, you enter the regular season. If the Raiders are the same old Raiders, if they start 1-3, if it moves to 1-4, if it moves to 2-5, if it looks like it's not going to be a playoff season and it looks like they want to continue building the youth, building with added assets for the NFL draft, all of a sudden entering that trade deadline, whenever it is, I think it's in early November. It's when November 1st was last year. All of a sudden, the Raiders might be willing to part with Maxx Crosby for a cheaper price than 2 first-round draft picks. And The 49ers, obviously, on the other side of the coin, well, they might be willing to meet that Raiders price. That's the most likely ground for a trade. Of course, something can happen sooner, but the reporting right now, the headlines right now that you know this is nuclear and imminent. It's like, give me a break. Stop trying to get me to click on everything just because it is a slow news period. There's gray area in all these things, and I don't think that aggregators are able to find that gray area because they just want maximum. You get a few bucks, I guess, every time that you post something on Twitter, and it gets a lot of engagement. So because of this need to just get as much as possible as far as audience, because it's dwindled at this point, because people are off on summer vacation, watching the World Cup. A lot of people aren't even following NFL news altogether. You got to make it seem like the 49ers are just hot on the pursuit of Maxx Crosby at this very moment. But I just have to bring some logic back to the equation. And the logic dictates that you just calm down. You know, it's June 17th, and the 49ers are going to identify what they have along that defensive line, which could be really, really surprisingly good this year. I mean, think about the fact that the only member of the 2024 rotation, right, the 10-man 49ers defensive line rotation, who's projected to be part of this 2026 49ers D-line rotation, is Nick Bosa. That's how much things have changed for the 49ers. Like, they decided, and I think that it was a necessary decision to make back in the 2025 offseason, that they needed to discard with the old. They needed to get better against the run, and they needed to bring in younger, hungrier, stouter players against the run, guys who could develop under rookie deals, who could fit into the 49ers cost structure since things were getting so much more expensive, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And so they did that. They parted ways with a Javon Hargrave, with a Malik Collins, with a Leonard Floyd. They brought in Mykel Williams, Alfred Collins, CJ West, guys they're not ready to give up on. I mean, all guys who have shown a lot of promising stuff for this team over the course of their first year. They doubled down on that path in 2026 in the most recent draft, and they really started to go more toward the pass rusher types now to start to fill things in. I think that if you look at the state of the defensive line right now, with Osa Odighizuwa added as a pass rusher to the interior, that was one of the more heralded trades in the NFL over the course of this spring. I think that they're probably one veteran edge rusher short of being a potentially dominant unit, like a quality veteran edge rusher short of being a dominant unit. They did lose Bryce Huff to retirement. They did bring in Romello Height. He should be a weapon they use all over that front seven this next year. But if you can get one more 3-down edge rusher, and that's obviously a lot easier said than done, you can be really damn good. So anybody who says that the 49ers are interested in Maxx Crosby, you're not breaking any news. You're not giving me any information I didn't already know. We saw Maxx Crosby interact with the 49ers at the joint practices in Vegas. Yeah, like they love the guy. I think that he really respects the 49ers coaching staff. I think he likes Chris Kaserik. I think he really likes Kyle Shanahan. I think that there's a really healthy back and forth there. But you can't just wake up and pretend that all rules are off on your game of Madden on franchise mode and add players as you wish. It just doesn't work that way in this league. Like, certain things have to line up, and in a certain case, timing has to line up. Somebody like Crosby, you know, the 49ers, they tried to build their defensive line in the same mold as the Rams as far as the early youth movement went, right? The Rams, when they decided to rebuild following Aaron Donald, and maybe Aaron Donald's going to be back now, so maybe we're going to be back in the Aaron Donald era. We'll see what happens with him and his rumored return from retirement. But the Rams, they went to the NFL draft. They got guys like Jared Verse. They got guys like Braden Fisk. I mean, they went heavy in on the defensive line in the NFL draft. They built a young, hungry defense, and it really, really worked for them. The 49ers followed suit, doing what I just said they did in 2024, or I guess in 2025 and 2026. The Rams are a couple years ahead of the 49ers in terms of their path through the salary cap cycle. Like you always spend and then you have to restrain yourself. You spend and you restrain yourself. And good franchises, good organizations actually find a way to stay good through the ebbs and flows of the salary cap cycle. Last year, the 49ers had to restrain themselves in free agency, right? They had spent on their own guys. They didn't restrain themselves on spending on their own guys. They had to re-sign Brock Purdy, Fred Warner, George Kittle. That was all business of last offseason. But they restrained themselves in free agency. They got a lot younger. They went through the draft. They followed the early part of that Rams formula, and they stayed good on the field. They still won 13 games. They still knocked off the defending champion Eagles in their own house up there in Philadelphia. So they I think successfully navigated the restraint part of the cycle, kind of like the Rams successfully navigated it in 2024 and 2025. Rams made the playoffs in 24 and obviously, I think they made it in 23 as well, right? Yeah, they made it in 23, lost to the Lions. In 24, they won a playoff game against Sam Darnold and the Vikings. And then the Rams last year went on a run and they lost in the NFC Championship game. But they were already back in the spending portion of their salary cap cycle. They started adding on the offensive side of the ball, right? Devontae Adams. They added Myles Garrett this offseason because they're in the spending cycle. The 49ers are now back in the spending cycle as well, as we saw with their behavior over the course of free agency. But I don't think it's full bore like the Rams yet. I think that's probably next offseason for the 49ers once you see some of these more veteran players exit the team. There could be a big-time renovation of the 49ers offense that I've talked about a lot after 2026. So the Myles Garrett came at an immense cost to LA, right? They even gave him a new contract that is absolutely massive, but they also had to spend one of the picks that they had picked up through the draft in Jared Verse as part of the haul that went to Cleveland for Myles Garrett. I think that the 49ers are in a part of their salary cap cycle where, yeah, of course they were interested in Garrett, but that's just not a price they could have matched. Similar to how the Ravens outbid the 49ers for Crosby before the failed physical. The 49ers didn't have the draft capital to go up there. It's like one team shows up with a $20 bill in their pocket. Another team only shows up with a $10 bill in their pocket. Well, of course, you're going to trade with the team with the 20. That was the case with the Ravens. That was the case with the Rams and the Browns because they had Jared Verse to trade. The 49ers didn't have anybody as valuable on a rookie deal as Jared Verse to trade. You can talk about trading Mykel Williams. He doesn't carry the same type of value as Jared Verse. But anyway, Rams consummate that trade for Myles Garrett. I think pay him a new contract, expensive on all ends. I think the 49ers need to be down a notch price point wise based on where they are at with the salary cap. They've got more star players than the Rams who they're paying A-list contracts. Their salary cap situation is inherently different. They might be emulating that LA model as far as rebuilding the defense, but it's still in a different spot financially. Enter Maxx Crosby. That's something that could make sense over the course of the regular season. Remember, with as big as his base salary is right now, it's somewhere around $30 million. I could check it in a second for the prorated amount, but every single week is going to be relatively expensive of Maxx Crosby. So every single week is going to also make him cheaper to acquire later in the season. I'm going to open up his contract right now and illustrate this for you guys so you can understand how timing in something like this might work. All right, so we got this up on Over the Cap. Just give me a second. Let me get this up onto the big screen for you. We got a bunch of ads. I don't want ads to compromise your viewing experience. So I am taking a screenshot and I'm moving this up here. And then I'm going to share the screen with everybody. Mike has sent me a message. We'll see what Mike sent me here in just a second. But first, I want to make sure that you guys get to see Maxx Crosby's contract. All right, share the screen. Boom. All right, there it is. You guys see it? All right, perfect. I think you do see it. So with Crosby's deal, we see that the base salary, as I said, was $30 million for 2026. That means that he's going to be paid by week. Okay. So when you talk about price point for the 49ers and, how much you can afford to dedicate to Maxx Crosby this year? Well, every single game is going to be 30 million divided by 17. Every game is going to cost $1.76 million of base salary for Maxx Crosby. That means that if you are 6-1, if you're the 49ers and you start 6-1, so 7 weeks have passed. I'm circling the base salary right there. That amount is discounted by a total of 1.76 million by times 7. That's 12.36 million. You can get Maxx Crosby for about 17 million this year versus 30 million this year if you get him in week 7 or 8 versus now. Those are significant savings. If you can't grasp that 13 million is a big deal. I mean, his deadline price would be about 14 or 15 million versus 30 million in base salary. Since it's prorated, you pay him by week. So if the Raiders handle the first several weeks of his contract, all of a sudden he's getting more affordable than by the week, right? And the Rams, obviously, because, I mean, the Rams in 2023 and then in 2024 still, but 2024 especially, the Rams had the lowest defensive spend in the entire league. They had a good team, but they built everything through the draft. They had the very lowest defensive spend in the entire league in 2024. That enabled them, that entire salary cap reset enabled the Rams to start pouring big money back into the operation and obviously pour resources into the operation as well. That preceded the Myles Garrett trade here in 2026. The 49ers had one of the lowest defensive spends in the league, and they will have one of the lowest defensive spends in the league this next year. It's much lower than it used to be. It's not going to be as low as the Rams were in 2024. You're still paying Bosa and Warner, but you have largely modernized the defense if you're the 49ers, which sets the table for opening the wallet again defensively and keeping yourself salary cap sustainable. However, I don't think that they were ever realistically capable of spending at the Myles Garrett level. I thought that, maybe if Myles Garrett came a little bit cheaper, would it be possible if the Browns didn't require a young player to go in the other direction? It might be possible, but the Browns did. They wanted Jared Verse. The 49ers could not offer that. Somebody like Maxx Crosby, that's going to be at a much more attainable price point, which is why we can talk about it. But again, we can talk about it along the lines of timing. It becomes much, much more feasible later on into this 2026 calendar year. All right, so I'm officially annoyed by all the clickbait headlines. I hope you are too. I hope that you get smarter every time that you watch content that actually talks about logic and financial restrictions, whether we're talking about Brandon Ayuk or Maxx Crosby or anything else 49ers related. I'm going to wade into the comments section and answer whatever questions are good that you might have, and then we're going to move on with our Wednesday. Proteus says, all the people who want Crosby are the same crowd who probably wanted Hendrickson. Imagine if the 49ers gave up a first-round pick for, I'm guessing you're saying, Trey Hendrickson. Well, the issue with Crosby, and I think it's an issue too with Hendrickson, he wasn't healthy for most of last season. Crosby was playing hurt last year. How quickly people forget that, I mean, he did fail the physical in Baltimore. Now, Baltimore might have gotten cold feet with the amount they had to pay, the 2 first-round picks, and they might have been looking for anything they could because those physicals are such a subjective test. It's your own doctor determining whether or not the guy is healthy. So I think, Baltimore acted in a sketchy manner in that situation. I get it, but the truth of the matter is that Crosby did have surgery at the end of last year. He got shut down at the end of the year, and he is on the wrong side of 30, and it is something that you absolutely have to do your diligence on. Yeah, it is absolutely something that should be baked into the price. I don't know how that's going to be baked into the price. It probably is a team-by-team determination of risk for Maxx Crosby, but, it is something that the 49ers would have to consider. And I think that's why it's something that probably isn't realistically going to be executable until the season starts and you know exactly, or you know more precisely, what you're going to need to make a run. You still have so many pieces on this 49ers team that need to be evaluated, starting with Mykel Williams, who was really good last year when he was available, and then he tore the ACL. So you got to see where he's going to be at. You got to see where Bosa's at coming off of the ACL this year. You want your young defensive tackles to blossom around Osa Odighizuwa. It's all connected along the defensive line. Information is a good thing, right? Information is something that the 49ers want to collect as much as possible before they make any commitments that at this point would cost them over $30 million this year, which quite frankly might not be in the 49ers cost structure if they want to keep this team sustainable with all the rising salaries moving forward. Proteus has some smart comments. Kaelon Black has good blocking tape. Johnny Dale did a really good breakdown on him. 49ers believe that Kaelon Black might be the best pass protector at the running back position in this whole class. And that, more than anything, might earn him quite a bit of playing time early on. You know, the last thing that you can afford, the guy can be an absolutely electric runner. He can even be a good pass catcher out of the backfield. But if you can't trust him in pass pro, he can not only blow up a play by his inability to pick up a hard-charging linebacker or safety or whoever, he can detonate your season. Because if you're not good in pass pro as a running back, that could get your quarterback hurt. And if Brock Purdy gets hurt, the 49ers are going to have a really hard time winning a Super Bowl. Like, you don't just... Mac Jones did a wonderful job keeping this team afloat last year. 49ers clearly have the best quarterback room in the NFL between Purdy and Jones. But Purdy is also very, very clearly an elite quarterback, and Mac Jones is clearly a very high-end backup. Somebody who might be able to be a starter again in this league if he continues improving and developing. That never ends. We've seen it with Sam Darnold. But Purdy's at the top, right? And you can't afford to lose him for the long run if you want to win a Super Bowl. So you better be able to pass protect if you're a running back. Like, it's as simple as that. And I think that's been really, really a feather in Kaelon Black's cap over the course of his college career. Joe thinks Prysock, Ephesians Prysock, is going to be good, saying this season's Upton Stout. Well, he's kind of the anti-Upton Stout by size, right? Stout, diminutive. What is Upton? 5'9", 5'10"? Ephesians Prysock, we're talking about a 6'4" corner, maybe 6'3". 6'3", but he looks 6'4" to me. Looks like he's got the wingspan of somebody who's a good 6'5". I mean, he is a long corner, just gets into passing lanes, can create some trouble. Now, he played much more physically toward the end of his college career at Washington, which was really promising. I thought he got flagged a little bit too much last year, picked up some pass interference, holding penalties. He's going to have to be more disciplined as a corner. They'll pick on that all day in the NFL. There probably still is some development to go, but, I mean, the guy, he was not short on the dog factor in college. And sometimes you're worried about that. Like other tall cornerbacks, let's go back through, tall cornerbacks the 49ers have had. Of course, Ahkello Witherspoon. I think he was lacking in the dog factor. Richard Sherman, he was not lacking in the dog factor. Does Ephesians Prysock have more Richard Sherman in him or more Ahkello Witherspoon in him? I mean, they're all tall. All these guys are 6'3". Where does Ephesians Prysock land in terms of mentality? That's going to be what determines his success or failure at the NFL level. I could say the 49ers have a lot of intel on the guy because he played for Jed Fish at the University of Washington. Mike sent a nice picture of Ephesians Prysock. I'll put that up on the screen here in a little bit. Natasha comes in. Thank you, Natasha. Appreciate you. She feels like Ricky Pearsall is going to prove all the haters wrong this year and all those calling for him to be traded. Ricky, when healthy, is a great player and just had some bad luck. If you actually look at the facts of the matter, I know a lot of people want to look at this with emotions and not facts, but Ricky Pearsall did not miss a single college game over 5 years. The only reason that Ricky Pearsall missed time his rookie year is because he got shot in the chest. That has nothing to do with being injury prone. And 2025, that was one injury that just didn't heal because he kept on trying to play on it. So if you think that one injury, one PCL makes somebody injury prone, be my guest. Don't go off talking about his hamstring or this and that if he played anyway. He played through all that stuff. If you're going to start talking about Ricky Pearsall and hamstring issues in training camp, then you're going to need to apply that same standard to every other NFL player to ever play in the history of the league, because everybody is constantly dealing with something in this league. If you play, you have overcome the injury, period. It's as simple as that. You can't go, what about this? What about that? If it held him out, if he missed time because of it, sure, you can count that against him. But again, tell me you've never played football without telling me you've never played football. Tell me you've never played a sport without telling me you've never played a sport. When you say, oh, this injury that Ricky Pearsall dealt with in training camp is something that makes him injury prone, without acknowledging that he actually played through that injury. If you've actually been exposed to high-level sports, especially violent sports like football, you will know that guys are dealing with stuff all the time. And there's only one injury that's held Ricky Pearsall out, and that was the PCL from last season. So until there's more than one injury that holds Ricky Pearsall out, I'm not going to go rushing and saying that the guy is injury prone, because I actually just believe in analyzing things factually instead of with my emotions. We got the Ephesians Prysock relative athletic score as well. Let's get this up here. This is good. This is the good stuff. This is why we got Mike cooking behind the scenes. I just have to cover up Maxx Crosby's contract with this. So first off, this right here, we talk about the wingspan of Ephesians Prysock is impressive, right? Then we've got the relative athletic score, which looks like this, which is very good. Arm length of over 33 inches. Awesome. I mean, you talk about 34 plus for offensive tackles. If you've got a cornerback with an arm length of 33 plus, that's really, really good. I mean, 34 plus for elite offensive tackles, right? I think DeJuan Jones is one of the biggest men in the NFL. That's 35. It's going to be impossible to see that at the cornerback position. Now, 49ers have a linebacker who also has a DB background, who's, I would say related to Ephesians Prysock, and as far as what the 49ers goal for him is, Jaden Duggar, he's got a wingspan of 84 inches, which is 7 feet. I think Prysock is somewhere like 81, maybe 82 inches, which is also really long. 49ers love this length, especially since Raheem Morris took over. They went after length in this NFL draft process with both the draftees and the undrafted guys. Larry Worth, the safety out of Arkansas, is going to play linebacker. They just want the back seven. The 49ers want length. Ephesians Prysock does bring it to the table. If you want to see the very bottom here, you could see fast 3-cone, even though he's tall. Short shuttle, really good. Height, weight, all solid. I mean, athletically, the guy checks out. And of course, you see the frame, and you just get excited when you see the frame, because there's all kinds of potential to interrupt passing lanes there. And that's what he did. It was just hard to get the ball over him in college. That's what Jed Fish told us. He just, like, from day one, he started as a true freshman at Arizona. And, when you want to measure the dog in a player, if you can start D1 college football as a true freshman and then hang on to your spot through your entire college career, that tells me something. But it was hard to throw over him. It was hard to throw around him. And you could see why right there. You could see why right here. Now, can he port that mentality to the NFL level? And how long is it going to take Ephesians Prysock to technically master what he needs to master at the NFL level? Good graphics there for Mike. All right, let's look at some more questions. What were the final points versus expectation for special teams in 2025? That's a great question. I need to look that up, and I can't immediately get that. I have that, I think, in my special teams review. They were in the positive. They weren't minus 60 or whatever they were. I think they're like minus 70 the year before. That was brutal. And also this is going to be different if you include the playoffs, especially the Seattle game. The 49ers obviously lost quite a bit on that kick return by Rashid Shaheed. That was tough at the very start of the Seattle game. But the 49ers were well in the positives, and over the course of the regular season, the 49ers ranked number 2 behind Seattle in special teams EPA. All right, good questions. Yeah, Ryan knows his stuff almost better than me, or you have a better photographic memory than me. They tell me that I have a good photographic memory, but I knew it was like between minus 60 and 70. This gives you an idea. In 2024, the 49ers lost 65 expected points on special teams. I mean, there's 17 regular season games. So if you're losing 65 on the season on special teams, that's an average of 3.8 points lost per game. Nearly 4 points lost per game. You know, I think the average NFL margin of victory is about 4 points. So the 49ers were losing the margin just on special teams on average every single game. It was an absolute disaster in 2024. They largely fixed it in 2025, but I think that there still is room to improve. I'm not so sure that Crosby's better than Nick Bosa. Remember, Crosby has not been at his very peak now for a couple seasons. He's been dealing with the knee, the meniscus. That's a red flag that you do have to investigate. I know Baltimore did investigate it. I still think that he's a fantastic player. I'm not trying to take away from that point. I just think that his very, very best years were around 2022, I think was the pressure high for Maxx Crosby. Now, the thing about him is that he's going to be fantastic against the run, and I thought he still was last year. The pass rushing numbers a little bit down, and obviously they shut him down there at the end of the season. But to say that he's better than Bosa, I mean, we'll see what happens. Bosa coming off yet another ACL tear, but Bosa has answered the bell every single time that he's been out on the field. It's hard for me to say that Crosby is better than Bosa. Mike found my article on the special teams overhaul. We can get this up on the screen. This is what I wrote. When was this? There's Eddie Pinheiro himself, April 19th. Wow, it's been 2 months since I wrote this. You can see the 49ers EPA ranks on special teams. Blue is good. Red is bad. The 2025 season's the furthest right column. 49ers ranked 2 overall, 9 on punt return. They lost Sky Moore. 5 on kick return. They lost both Sky Moore and Brian Robinson. They could still do a much better job covering kickoffs and covering punts. And obviously good on the field goals, number 9, and they would have been even better had they not had the one Jake Moody game week 1 against Seattle. That hurt the 49ers. So to answer your special teams question, there's some ranks. Lombardi herself and Savannah Lombardi that's the second Lombardi herself. I guess there's 2 Lombardi herselfs now. They have doubled in numbers. They're both doing great. Lombardi herself, number 2. So Savannah Lombardi is 2 months old, just turned 8 weeks a couple days ago, and measures 25 inches in height. They told me she's 100th percentile in height. And I said, that's impossible. That would make her the tallest baby in world history. And they said, well, she's actually like 99.5 percentile. So I said, okay, that's more believable. But 2 months, 25 inches. At 1 month, she was 23 inches. So she's grown 2 inches in a month. If I'm doing my math correctly, if she maintains this pace, she will grow 24 inches in a year, which would be 2 feet in a year, which would be insane, which I don't think is going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. That'd be wild. But that would make history. Anyway, Her mom is 5'11". I'm 6'5" and a half. Don't forget the half there at the end. So I guess that we should have seen this coming, but I didn't know that she was going to be 99.5 percentile in height. She's literally 25 inches at 2 months. So yeah, it is long. That's for sure. Thanks for the question, Joy. I really appreciate it. She's going to be tall, just like us. I don't know if Maxx Crosby wants to stay in Vegas. I think he says that he loves the Raiders when he's there. But when he gets traded, I mean, the tune, I think, started to change the few days he thought he was going to be in Baltimore. I don't think Maxx Crosby would mind coming back to the Bay Area. I think that he has fond memories as a member of the Oakland Raiders that started his NFL career. And I just think the timing is everything. And more than just accurate reporting is everything. And it that includes, you could say that the 49ers are interested in Maxx Crosby. It's true, but don't act like it's breaking news. They've been interested in this guy for a while. And they're not interested in him as a reaction to the Rams getting Myles Garrett. They're not interested in him because they've got a ton of salary cap space. They're interested in him because they're trying to bolster that defensive line as much as possible. They can do it at a certain price point. They're further back than the Rams in terms of the salary cap cycle. Crosby would come cheaper than a Myles Garrett, both trade-wise, capital-wise, and cost, like dollar-wise on the cap. And he's going to get cheaper every single week, like $1.76 million cheaper every single week of the 2026 season, because that's how the $30 million base salary works. It is paid off by the Raiders on a weekly basis. The Raiders back there, Shane Leckler, 49ers would pay the rest if they ever got Maxx Crosby. So anyway, read everything with a grain of salt. Actually, read the articles, not just the headlines, because the headlines are full of crap a lot of the time. People want you to click. There's nuance to everything. Just thought I would make a PSA. All right, I am going to go chill. See you guys later.